At 11:42 p.m., Julian Thorne was raising a glass of vintage Dom Perignon, laughing at a joke whispered by a woman who wasn't his wife. He was on top of the world, young, wealthy, and untouchable. But at that exact same minute, across the city, his phone vibrated on a hospital nightstand, unanswered. While Julian celebrated his illicit freedom, his 4-year-old son took his final, ragged breath. Julian thought he was the king of his empire, but he forgot one thing. His wife had a father. And when that father found out why his grandson died, he didn't want an apology. He wanted blood. The rain in Seattle was relentless that night, hammering against the glass walls of the penthouses in the downtown district like bullets. Inside the master suite of the Sterling Hotel, however, the storm was just a distant backdrop to luxury. Julian Thorne, the 34-year-old CEO of Thorne Logistics, loosened his silk tie and tossed it onto the plush armchair. He checked his reflection in the mirror. Handsome, sharp-jawed, and radiating the kind of arrogance that came with inheriting $50 million before the age of 30. "Stop looking at yourself, Julian. Come here," a voice purred from the bed. Sasha Miller, his devastatingly beautiful VP of marketing, was waiting for him. She was everything his wife, Elena, wasn't. Sasha was loud, demanding, and exciting. Elena was quiet, domestic, and, in Julian's current opinion, boring. Elena was home, taking care of their son, Leo. Sasha was the escape. "Just checking my phone," Julian said, glancing at the screen. 3 missed calls. All from the wife. Sasha rolled her eyes, taking a sip of champagne. "She's pathetic, you know? It's a Tuesday. She knows you have late board meetings on Tuesdays. Why does she keep calling? Leo probably has a fever again." Julian sighed, silencing the device and flipping it face down on the marble table. "She panics over everything. Last week it was a scraped knee. Today, who knows?" "You work too hard to deal with domestic drama," Sasha said, standing up and walking toward him. "Tonight is about us. You promised." "I know," Julian smiled, wrapping his arms around her waist. The guilt that used to plague him 6 months ago when this affair started was gone, replaced by a sense of entitlement. He provided the mansion. He paid the bills. He deserved this. 5 miles away, the scene was a nightmare in grayscale. Elena Thorne wasn't panicking over a scraped knee. She was screaming, "Please, you have to drive faster," she sobbed, clutching her chest. She was in the back of an Uber, a beat-up Toyota Camry that smelled of stale cigarettes, because Julian had taken the Range Rover, and her own car was in the shop for repairs. Next to her, strapped into his car seat, 4-year-old Leo was turning blue. "I'm going as fast as I can, lady, but the traffic is gridlocked," the driver yelled, clearly terrified. "Leo, baby, stay with me. Mommy is here. Daddy is coming soon." Elena lied, her hands shaking so violently she dropped her phone. She picked it up and dialed Julian for the 4th time. "Hi, you've reached Julian. I'm in a meeting. Leave a message." The voicemail beep mocked her. "Julian!" she screamed into the phone, her voice cracking into a guttural wail. "Pick up!" "Leo is having a reaction. The EpiPen didn't work. I'm in a stranger's car on I-5. Please, Julian, pick up." She ended the call. No answer. Earlier that evening, Leo had eaten a cookie at a neighbor's birthday party. It was supposed to be nut-free. It wasn't. His throat had begun to close within minutes. Elena had jammed the emergency EpiPen into his thigh, but the mechanism had jammed a 1 in a million manufacturing defect. She had called 911, but a massive pileup on the bridge had delayed the ambulance dispatch by 20 minutes. Desperate, she had grabbed Leo and hailed the first rideshare she could find. "He's not breathing!" Elena screamed, unbuckling Leo and pulling his limp body into her arms. "Oh God, Leo, look at Mommy." The driver swerved onto the shoulder, bypassing the traffic, risking his own life as he sped toward Seattle Grace Hospital. Back at the Sterling Hotel, the mood was electric. Julian poured another glass of Dom Perignon. To the merger, Sasha toasted, clinking her glass against his. To us, Julian corrected. His phone buzzed again on the table, a text message this time. He glanced at it. Elena, Julian, please. Hospital, now. He frowned. She's persistent. Don't look at it, Sasha whispered, taking the phone from his hand. If it was a real emergency, the police would call. She's just trying to guilt you because you're not home for dinner. My ex used to do that. It's a control tactic. Julian hesitated. He looked at the woman in front of him, so confident and alluring, and then thought of Elena, probably wearing sweatpants, crying because Leo wouldn't eat his vegetables. Sasha was right. Elena was always dramatic. Turn it off, Julian said. Sasha smiled, pressed the power button, and the screen went black. At 11:42 p.m., Julian Thorne kissed his mistress, feeling like the master of his universe. At 11:42 p.m., inside the trauma room of Seattle Grace, the chaotic shouting of doctors and nurses suddenly stopped. Elena was pressed against the wall, her knuckles white as she gripped the fabric of her coat. A young doctor, sweat beading on his forehead, lowered the defibrillator paddles. He looked at the clock on the wall, then at his team. He shook his head slowly. Time of death, the doctor whispered, his voice heavy with defeat. 11:42 p.m. Elena didn't scream. The sound that left her body was worse than a scream. It was the sound of a soul shattering. She slid down the wall, her eyes fixed on the small, pale hand hanging off the side of the hospital bed. The hand that had held hers just an hour ago. The room was silent, save for the hum of the machines and the soft, rhythmic sound of the rain against the window. Elena crawled toward the bed. She took Leo's hand. It was still warm. I called him, Leo, she whispered, stroking his hair. I called Daddy. He didn't answer. He never answers. She pulled her phone out. 5 missed calls. 2 unread texts. And then she saw the notification from Instagram. Sasha Miller had posted a story just 2 minutes ago. It was a photo of 2 champagne glasses clinking against the backdrop of the city skyline. The caption read, Late night meetings are the best kind. #power couple, #the good life. In the reflection of the glass window in the photo, faint but unmistakable, was the profile of Julian Thorne, laughing. Elena stared at the image. The grief in her chest began to harden. It cooled, froze, and then turned into something sharp and jagged. She looked at her dead son. Then she looked at the phone. She didn't cry anymore. She stood up, wiping the tears from her face with a terrifying calmness. He thinks he's safe, she whispered to the empty air. He thinks he can turn off his phone and the world stops. She kissed Leo's forehead one last time. I'm going to call Grandpa, Leo. I know I promised I never would. But I'm going to call him now. Julian arrived home at 7 a.m. the next morning. He had showered at the hotel, brushed his teeth 3 times to remove the scent of expensive scotch, and practiced his lie on the drive over. The merger talks went all night. My battery died. I slept in the office lounge. He pulled his Range Rover into the driveway of their suburban estate in Bellevue. He expected to see the lights off, maybe Elena sleeping in the guest room in protest. Instead, he saw cars. 3 of them. Black SUVs with tinted windows, parked in a phalanx formation blocking his garage. Julian frowned. He parked on the street and stormed up the driveway. What the hell is this? He muttered. The front door was unlocked. He walked in, ready to yell at Elena for inviting people over without asking him. Elena, he shouted, dropping his keys on the foyer table. Why are there 3 tanks parked in my... He froze. The living room was stripped. Not robbed. Stripped. The photos on the mantel were gone. Leo's toys, usually scattered across the rug, were gone. The throw pillows, Elena's books, the smell of her vanilla candles, all gone. Sitting in Julian's favorite leather armchair was a man Julian had never met. He was old, perhaps in his late 60s, but he was built like a mountain carved from granite. He wore a black suit that cost more than Julian's car. His hair was silver, swept back, and his face was a map of scars and deep lines. He held a cane topped with a silver wolf's head. "Who are you?" Julian demanded, his voice trembling slightly despite his anger. "Where is my wife? Where is my son?" The old man didn't blink. He just stared at Julian with eyes that looked like frozen lakes. "Your wife," the man said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in Julian's chest, "is at the funeral home, selecting a casket." Julian felt the blood drain from his face. "What? Is this a sick joke? Who are you?" "And your son," the man continued, ignoring Julian's question, "is currently in the morgue. Anaphylactic shock. 11:42 p.m. last night." The world tilted on its axis. Julian grabbed the doorframe to steady himself. "Leo?" No, that's impossible. I saw him yesterday morning. He was fine." "He needed you," the man said. He stood up slowly, towering over Julian. "His mother called you 5 times. Why didn't you answer, Julian?" My battery. I was working." Julian stammered, the lie tasting like ash in his mouth. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a printed photograph. He tossed it onto the coffee table. It was the screenshot of Sasha's Instagram story. The champagne. The reflection. The timestamp. "Work looks enjoyable," the man said dryly. Julian stared at the photo. "Who are you?" he whispered again. "My name," the man said, stepping closer, "is Victor Volkov." Julian gasped. Everyone in the business world knew the name, but nobody had seen the face in 20 years. Victor Volkov was a ghost story, a Russian-American industrialist who had dominated steel and shipping in the 90s before vanishing. Rumors said he had ties to the Bratva, that he had killed men with his bare hands, that he controlled half the politicians in the state. "Volkov," Julian breathed. "But why?" "Elena is my daughter," Victor said. Julian's eyes widened. "No, Elena's maiden name was Smith. Her father was a mechanic in Ohio. She told me he died when she was 10. She lied," Victor said simply. "She wanted a simple life. She wanted to escape my world. She wanted to marry for love, not power, so I let her go. I gave her a new identity and I stayed away. I promised her I would never interfere unless she asked me to." Victor leaned in, his face inches from Julian's. Julian could smell tobacco and old leather. "At 12:30 a.m. she called me. She broke our agreement. Do you know why?" Julian couldn't speak. He shook his head. "Because you killed my grandson." "I didn't!" Julian shouted, panic rising. "It was an accident. An allergy." "Negligence is not an accident," Victor corrected. "You abandoned your post. You abandoned your family for a whore and a bottle of wine." Victor turned and walked toward the door. 2 massive bodyguards materialized from the kitchen, flanking him. "Where is Elena?" Julian cried out. "I need to see her. I need to explain." Victor stopped at the door. "She doesn't want to see you. She has filed for divorce this morning. You are not welcome at the funeral." "You can't stop me. He was my son." Victor turned his head slightly. "Julian, look at me." Julian looked. "I am not going to kill you," Victor said softly. "Death is too easy." "It is too quick. You took away the future of my family. So I am going to take away your present. I am going to take your past. I am going to strip you until you are as naked and helpless as my grandson was in that hospital bed. You can't threaten me." Julian tried to muster his CEO bravado. "I have lawyers. I have security. I'm Julian Thorne." Victor smiled. It was a terrifying, humorless expression. "Enjoy your house, Julian. For now." Victor walked out. The SUVs roared to life. Julian stood alone in his empty living room, the silence deafening. He grabbed his phone and called Sasha. "Julian," she answered, sounding sleepy. "Pack a bag," Julian said, his voice shaking. I think I'm in trouble." "What kind of trouble?" "The kind that doesn't go away." 3 days later, the funeral was held at a private cathedral. Julian tried to enter. Security guards, off-duty police officers paid triple their rate, blocked him at the gate. He stood in the rain, watching from a distance as a small white coffin was carried out. He saw Elena, dressed in black, looking smaller and frailer than he had ever seen her. She was holding the arm of Viktor Volkov. Julian screamed her name. "Elena! I'm sorry, Elena!" She didn't even turn her head. She got into the limousine with her father and drove away. Julian returned to the Sterling Hotel, seeking comfort in Sasha's arms. "Don't worry, baby," Sasha cooed, running her hands through his hair. "It's tragic, yes, but people move on. You're still the CEO of Thorne Logistics. You're still rich. We can start over. Maybe we can have a baby of our own soon." Julian looked at her, a strange feeling of revulsion curling in his stomach, but he pushed it down. She was all he had left now. "Yeah," Julian said, pouring a drink. "We'll start over. Volkov is just an old man. He can't touch me. My company is publicly traded. I'm untouchable." At that exact moment, across town in a dimly lit study, Viktor Volkov placed a chess piece on a board. "Is everything in place?" he asked the shadow in the corner. "Yes, Mr. Volkov," a man replied. "We have acquired the bank that holds Thorne's personal loans. We have also contacted the Mistress's former assistant, the one she fired for stealing." "Good," Viktor said. "Start with the money, then go for the reputation. Save the girl for last." "And Julian?" Viktor looked at a picture of Leo on his desk. "Let him bleed slowly." Monday morning arrived with a deceptive calm. The rain had stopped, leaving Seattle scrubbed clean and gray. Julian Thorne adjusted his tie in the rear-view mirror of a rental sedan, a Ford Taurus that smelled of pine air freshener. His Range Rover had been repossessed from the driveway at 3 a.m. by a tow truck driver who didn't care that Julian was a CEO. The driver simply had a work order from a shell company called Obsidian Capital. "It's a mistake," Julian muttered to himself, gripping the steering wheel. "Just a clerical error. I'll fire the bank manager by noon." He pulled into the underground parking garage of Thorne Logistics. He drove toward his reserved spot, the one painted with his name. It was occupied. A massive black Mercedes Maybach was parked diagonally across his spot and the one next to it. Leaning against the hood was one of the bodyguards from Viktor Volkov's entourage. The man didn't say a word. He just tapped his wrist, indicating the time. Julian swerved and parked in a visitor spot 3 levels down. He stormed toward the elevator, his anger acting as a shield against the grief he refused to feel. "Focus on the company," he told himself. "The company is real. The company is yours." He swiped his keycard at the executive elevator. A red light flashed. Access denied. He swiped again. Red light. "Damn it!" Julian kicked the metal doors. "Mr. Thorne!" Julian spun around. It was Sarah, the front desk receptionist. She looked terrified. "My card is demagnetized, Sarah." "Buzz me up," Julian barked. I can't, sir," she stammered, looking down at her monitor. "Security has flagged your credentials. You've been locked out of the system pending a board review." "A board review? I am the chairman of the board." Julian vaulted the turnstile, ignoring the security guard who half-heartedly tried to stop him, and took the stairs. 20 flights. By the time he burst onto the executive floor, he was sweating, his chest heaving, his pristine suit dampened. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet. He pushed open the double-glass doors to the main conference room. The entire board of directors was there, 10 men and women, who usually bowed to Julian's every whim. But today, they wouldn't meet his eyes. At the head of the table, Julian's seat, sat a woman with icy blonde hair and a suit that looked like armor. Julian recognized her immediately. Lydia Cross, the most ruthless corporate liquidator in New York. "What is going on?" Julian demanded, slamming his hand on the mahogany table. Get out of my chair. Lydia didn't blink. She slid a thick file folder across the table. It stopped inches from Julian's hand. Mr. Thorne, Lydia said, her voice smooth and dangerous. At 8 a.m. this morning, Thorne Logistics received a notice of default on its primary operational loans. The covenants of those loans state that in the event of a reputational crisis involving the CEO, the lender has the right to accelerate the debt. What crisis? Julian laughed nervously. My personal life is private. My son died, yes, it's tragic, but it doesn't affect the bottom line. It does when the lender decides it does, Lydia said. The lender is Obsidian Capital. The name rang a bell. The same company that took his car. Obsidian Capital, Julian sneered. I've never done business with them. You have, Lydia corrected. You just didn't know it. Obsidian bought your debt from Wells Fargo on Saturday morning. They paid 20 cents on the dollar. They wanted your leverage, Julian. And now they have it. She opened a folder. Furthermore, the forensic audit triggered by the default has uncovered some irregularities. Company funds used for a penthouse suite at the Sterling Hotel? Jewelry purchases listed as client gifts that were never given to clients? Julian felt the room spin. Sasha's gifts. The hotel room. He had run it all through the company expense account. Everyone did it. It was a perk of the job. That's standard practice. It's embezzlement. Lydia cut him off. And Obsidian Capital, as the majority debt holder, has forced a vote of no confidence. The board has voted unanimously, Julian. She stood up. You are fired. Effective immediately, your stock options are frozen pending the criminal investigation. Criminal? Julian choked out. The SEC has already been notified, Lydia said, checking her watch. Security will escort you out. You have 5 minutes to collect personal items. No electronics. 2 burly security guards, men Julian had hired, stepped forward. One of them, a man named Mike, who Julian had tipped $100 to last Christmas, looked at him with pity. Let's go, Mr. Thorne, Mike said softly. This is Volkov, isn't it? Julian screamed, lunging toward the window that overlooked the city. He's doing this! You're all puppets! Mr. Volkov is simply a concerned investor, Lydia said, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. He believes in ethical leadership. Julian was dragged out of the building he had built. He stood on the sidewalk, holding a cardboard box containing a framed degree and a stapler. It began to rain again. He reached for his phone to call his lawyer, but his screen was black. Service suspended. He walked to an ATM on the corner, shivering in the cold. He inserted his personal debit card. Transaction declined. Contact your branch. He tried his credit card. Declined. He had $50 million in assets yesterday. Today he couldn't buy a bottle of water. He checked his pockets. He had $40 in cash. Enough for a cab to the Sterling Hotel. Sasha would help him. Sasha had money. She had a trust fund, or so she had claimed. They would fight this together. As he hailed a cab, he saw a news ticker on a digital billboard across the street. Breaking. Thorne Logistics CEO ousted amidst embezzlement scandal. Stock plummets 40%. And right below it, a smaller headline. The Champagne Killer. Social media outrage grows over Mistress's timing. Julian's stomach dropped. He got into the cab. Sterling Hotel, he croaked. And hurry. The Sterling Hotel was usually a sanctuary of hush-hush luxury. But when Julian arrived, the lobby was a circus. Paparazzi were swarming the elevators. Flashbulbs popped like strobes. Security was trying to hold back a group of protesters holding signs. Justice for Leo. Boycott Thorne. Silence is violence. Julian pulled his suit jacket over his head and pushed through the crowd. It's him! It's the father! Someone screamed. A camera was shoved in his face. Mr. Thorne, did you really turn off your phone to sleep with your mistress while your son died? Mr. Thorne, do you have any comment on the embezzlement charges? Julian shoved a cameraman aside and dove into the service elevator, using an old code he knew from the days he practically lived there. He rode up to the penthouse, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He burst into the room. "Sasha!" The penthouse was in chaos. Suitcases were open on the bed. Clothes were strewn everywhere. Gucci, Prada, Yves Saint Laurent. Sasha was frantically shoving shoes into a duffel bag. She looked up, her eyes wild. Her mascara was running. "You!" she shrieked. "You did this to me." "What?" Julian was breathless. "Sasha, calm down. They froze my accounts. I need to borrow some cash. Just until I fix this. We can go to your family's place in Aspen." Sasha laughed. A high-pitched, hysterical sound. She threw a Louboutin heel at him. It bounced off his chest. "Aspen? There is no Aspen, you idiot. My family isn't rich. I lied. I needed you to think I was on your level." Julian froze. "What? And now look." Sasha grabbed her iPad and shoved it in his face. It was her Instagram account. The comments section on the photo of the champagne glasses, the one Victor Volkov had shown Julian, was scrolling so fast it was a blur. "Baby killer. Home wrecker. I hope you rot. We knew where you live. Someone leaked my address," Sasha sobbed. "They leaked my phone number. My parents' phone number. They're calling my mother and calling her a whore who raised a monster." "Who leaked it?" Julian asked, though he already knew. "A blog called The Wolf's Watch." Sasha spat. "They posted everything. My timeline, your timeline, the timestamps of your wife's calls versus the timestamp of my post. They painted a picture, Julian, and we look like devils." "We can fix the PR," Julian said, trying to grab her shoulders. "We just need to leave town." "I can't leave town," Sasha screamed, pushing him away. "The police are downstairs." "Police? For what? The protesters?" "No, for me." Sasha fell onto the bed, burying her face in her hands. "Someone sent the DA's office a file, an anonymous file, from my old job at Nexus Marketing." Julian blinked. "What about it?" I might have diverted some funds," Sasha whispered, "just a little, to pay off my student loans. I thought I covered my tracks. But they have everything. Emails, bank transfers, fake invoices. They have a confession I wrote in a diary app on my old phone. How did they get that?" Julian felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Victor Volkov. He didn't just buy the debt, he bought the data. He had likely hired hackers, forensic accountants, private investigators. He had dismantled Sasha's life as thoroughly as he had dismantled Julian's. "They're here to arrest me for grand larceny," Sasha cried. "Julian, you have to help me. You have lawyers. Call them." Julian looked at the woman he had destroyed his family for. She was a fraud. A liar. And now, a liability. "I can't," Julian said coldly. "I was fired this morning. I have no lawyers. I have no money." Sasha stopped crying instantly. She looked up at him, her face twisting into a sneer. "You're broke?" "Yes." "Then get out," she hissed. "What?" "If you can't protect me, you're useless to me," Sasha said, standing up and zipping her bag. "I'm going to cut a deal. I'll tell them everything. I'll tell them you forced me to embezzle from Thorne Logistics. I'll say you were the mastermind. I'll say I was a victim of your power dynamic." Julian stared at her. "You wouldn't. Watch me. It's my only way out of prison." A heavy pounding on the door interrupted them. "Police! Open up!" Sasha ran to the door, throwing it open. "Officer! Thank God! He's here! He's the one who made me do it!" Julian stood frozen as two officers walked in. But they didn't look at Julian. They walked straight to Sasha. "Sasha Miller?" the older officer asked. "Yes. But listen, Julian Thorne is— You are under arrest for grand larceny, wire fraud, and corporate espionage," the officer said, snapping handcuffs on her wrists. "Espionage?" Sasha yelped. "I never." We received evidence that you were selling Thorne Logistics client lists to a competitor in China, the officer said. Mr. Thorne might be a bad father, ma'am, but according to this evidence, you were stealing from him too. Julian watched, stunned. Sasha had been selling him out the entire time? Sasha screamed as they dragged her out. Julian, help me! I love you! Julian! The door slammed shut. Julian was alone in the penthouse. The silence was heavy. He walked to the window and looked down at the rainy streets. He had lost his wife, he had lost his son, he had lost his company, he had lost his fortune. And now he realized the woman he sacrificed it all for was a mirage. He spotted a piece of paper on the floor, dropped by the police officer in the scuffle. It was a business card. Black cardstock. Silver lettering. Victor Volkov. Checkmate. Julian crumpled the card in his fist. He sank to his knees on the plush carpet, the smell of Sasha's perfume making him gag. He had hit rock bottom. Or so he thought. But Victor Volkov wasn't done. He hadn't just come for the money and the mistress. He had come for the soul. And the next phase of the plan was about to begin. The eviction from the Sterling Hotel was not dignified. It was efficient. Julian had refused to leave the penthouse for 48 hours, surviving on tap water and the minibar peanuts. But when the credit card on file declined for the third night, management didn't send a bellboy. They sent the police. Mr. Thorne, this is private property, the officer said, not unkindly. It was the same officer who had arrested Sasha 2 days prior. You have to go. Julian walked out of the hotel lobby, wearing his wrinkled Brioni suit, carrying a plastic grocery bag containing his toothbrush, his useless phone, and the framed diploma he had salvaged from his office. It was 9 p.m. on a Thursday. Seattle was cold, a damp chill that settled into the bones. Julian checked his pockets. He had the $40 he had withdrawn earlier, and his Rolex Daytona. It's fine, he muttered, shivering as the wind hit him. I'll sell the watch. It's worth 30 grand. I'll get a cheap motel, get a burner phone, call some contacts in New York. He walked 3 blocks to a high-end pawn shop on 4th Avenue, a place known for discreetly handling the liquidity problems of the rich. He placed the watch on the counter. I need cash. Fast. The broker, a man named Elias who had sold Julian rare coins in the past, looked at the watch. Then he looked at Julian. He didn't pick up the loop. I can't take this, Mr. Thorne. What? It's authentic. I bought it from the boutique. I know it is, Elias said, leaning forward, his voice lowered. But I had a visitor this morning, a man with a cane. He gave me a list of serial numbers. Your watch, your cufflinks, your wedding ring. He said if any of these items appear in a shop in Seattle, the shop will lose its business license by noon the next day. Julian stared at him. You're afraid of an old man? I'm afraid of Victor Volkov, Elias corrected. Everyone who knows the history of this city is afraid of him. Go home, Julian. Oh, wait, you don't have one? Elias buzzed the door open. Get out! Julian stumbled back onto the street. The rejection stung more than the cold. He was radioactive. He walked for hours. He tried to enter a bar where he was a regular, but the bouncer turned him away. Owner said no entry for you, boss. Sorry. He tried to call his old college roommate from a payphone, using his last quarters. The roommate hung up the moment he heard Julian's voice. By 3 a.m., the exhaustion was overpowering. Julian found himself in Pioneer Square, the historic district where the homeless congregated. He sat on a bench, clutching his plastic bag. A man pushing a shopping cart full of cans sat next to him. Rough night suit? The man asked. You have no idea, Julian whispered. I know the look, the man said. I was a stockbroker in '08. Lost it all. Wife left. Bottle took the rest. He offered Julian a half-eaten sandwich wrapped in foil. Turkey. It's dry, but it helps. Julian looked at the sandwich. 3 days ago, he had been eating Wagyu beef. His stomach roared. He took the sandwich. Thank you, Julian said, tears pricking his eyes. It was the first act of kindness anyone had shown him since Leo died. "What's your name?" the man asked. "Julian." "I'm Pete. Welcome to the Invisible City, Julian." For the next 2 weeks, Julian Thorne, the logistics mogul, lived the life of a ghost. He learned which shelters were safe and which were dangerous. He learned that his Italian leather shoes offered 0 traction on wet pavement. He learned that hunger wasn't just a feeling in the stomach. It was a headache that never went away, a fog that slowed his thoughts. But the worst part wasn't the hunger. It was the screens. Everywhere he went, passing electronics stores, glancing into sports bars, he saw the news. The scandal hadn't died down. It had exploded. The Thorne legacy, a house built on fraud. Sasha Miller pleads guilty, implicates Thorne in massive scheme. And the most damning one of all, a televised interview with Elena. Julian stood outside an appliance store in the rain, watching the row of TVs in the window. Elena was sitting in a garden, looking pale but composed. "I don't hate him," Elena said to the interviewer, her voice trembling slightly. "Hate takes energy. I mourn the man I thought he was. The man who was Leo's father died a long time ago. The man who let our son die while he was occupied, he is a stranger to me." Julian pressed his hand against the cold glass of the shop window. "I'm sorry, Elena," he whispered, his reflection in the glass looking gaunt, unshaven and wild. "I didn't know." "Hey, move it, bum. You're scaring the customers." "Hey." Store manager banged on the glass from the inside. Julian flinched and backed away. He walked toward the waterfront, the gray water of the Puget Sound looking, inviting. It would be so easy. Just one step. The cold would take him quickly. He stood at the edge of the pier. He closed his eyes. "Not yet." The voice came from behind him. Julian turned. Standing 10 feet away, flanked by his shadows, was Victor Volkov. Julian laughed. A dry, cracking sound. "Here to push me in?" "No," Victor said. He walked closer, leaning on his wolf-head cane. He looked at Julian's dirty suit, his matted hair, the hollows of his cheeks. "I wanted to see if the gold was plated or solid." "It seems you were just plated, Julian." The shine rubbed off very quickly. "You won," Julian rasped. "You took everything. My money, my name, my life. Just kill me and get it over with." "I told you," Victor said. "Death is too easy. You are learning what it feels like to be small, to be unheard. When my daughter called you that night, she felt small. She felt unheard. Now you understand the frequency." Victor reached into his coat and pulled out a small velvet bag. He tossed it to Julian. Julian caught it. He opened it. Inside was a small plastic toy car. "A red race car," Julian gasped. It was Leo's favorite, the one he insisted on holding while he slept. "I found it in your Range Rover," Victor said, "under the passenger's seat. He must have dropped it the last time you deigned to drive him to school." Julian clutched the toy, his knees giving out. He collapsed onto the wet wood of the pier, sobbing. The grief he had suppressed with arrogance, with anger, with shock. It finally broke the dam. "Leo," he wailed. "Leo, Daddy's sorry." Victor watched him, his expression unreadable. "Keep the car," Victor said. "It is the only asset you have left that has any real value." Victor turned to leave. "Wait," Julian cried out, looking up through his tears. "Why? Why didn't you just destroy me day one? Why drag it out?" Victor stopped. He didn't turn around. "Because, Julian, a man who loses his wallet learns nothing. A man who loses his soul has to go find it again. If you survive this winter, maybe you will find yours." Victor walked away into the mist. Julian sat on the pier, holding the plastic car against his chest as the rain washed over him. He didn't jump. He couldn't. He had something to protect now, even if it was just a piece of plastic. 3 months passed. Winter turned to a hesitant spring. Julian Thorne was still on the streets, but he had changed. The shock of his fall had worn off, replaced by a grim determination to survive. He had found work as a day laborer at a construction site in Tacoma, paid in cash under the table. It was backbreaking work, hauling drywall, mixing cement, work that made his soft CEO hands bleed and callous. But he did it. He didn't complain. He kept his head down. He rented a room in a boarding house that smelled of boiled cabbage and mildew. It was a 10-by-10 cell, but it was dry. Every night, he placed the red plastic race car on the nightstand. It was his altar. He hadn't touched a drop of alcohol. He hadn't tried to contact Sasha, who was currently serving 3 years in a minimum security prison. He hadn't tried to fight the legal battles. He let the default judgments roll in. He was saving his money. Not for a suit. Not for a lawyer. For a headstone. He had visited the cemetery once, secretly, at night. Leo's grave was marked by a temporary plaque. Leo Thorne, beloved son. It was too small. Too temporary. Julian wanted to buy him the finest marble monument in the city. It was the only goal he had left. One evening, as he was walking back to the boarding house, a black sedan pulled up alongside him. Julian flinched, expecting Volkov. But the window rolled down to reveal a woman. It wasn't Elena. It was Lydia Cross, the liquidator who had fired him. "Get in, Julian," she said. Julian hesitated. "I have nothing left to take, Lydia." "I'm not here to take. I'm here to give you a ride. Someone wants to see you." "Volkov?" "No." Julian got in. The car smelled of leather and expensive perfume, a scent that used to be his normal, now alien to him. They drove to a quiet park on the outskirts of the city. Lydia stopped the car. "Over there, on the bench." Julian got out. He walked toward the bench overlooking the lake. Sitting there, wrapped in a thick wool coat, was Elena. Julian stopped 10 feet away. He felt a wave of shame, so intense it almost knocked him over. He wanted to run. He wanted to hide his dirty work boots, his rough hands, his graying hair. "Hello, Julian," Elena said. Her voice was calm. Not warm, but not sharp. "Elena," he choked out. I shouldn't be here." "My father told me where you were," she said. "He told me you're working construction, that you're sober." "I am. He also told me you're saving up for Leo's headstone." Julian looked down at his boots. "The temporary one. It's not enough. He deserves better." Elena stood up. She looked different. Stronger. The fragility was gone, replaced by a scar tissue that had healed over the wound. "I already ordered the headstone, Julian," she said softly. "It's being installed next week. Angels. He loved angels." Julian nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Okay, that's good." "I didn't come here to talk about the stone," Elena said. She took a step closer. "I came here because I needed to see if it was true, if the monster was dead." "The monster is dead," Julian whispered. "He died the same night Leo did. I'm just the shell left behind." Elena looked at him, studying his face. "I found the recording," she said. "What recording?" "The voicemail, from that night." Julian's blood ran cold. "I didn't answer." "No, but the voicemail picked up, and you didn't hang up properly. It recorded for 3 minutes. Julian closed his eyes. He didn't remember that. "I listened to it," Elena said, her voice shaking for the first time. "I heard Sasha laughing. I heard the champagne cork. And I heard you said, 'She panics over everything. It's probably just a scraped knee.'" Julian fell to his knees in the grass. "Elena, please." "Kill me. Just kill me." "I wanted to," she admitted. "For months. I wanted you to die screaming. But then I realized you didn't know. You were arrogant and selfish and cruel, but you didn't know he was dying." She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "I'm moving," she said. "To Italy. My father has a villa there. I'm taking Leo's things. I'm starting over." She dropped the envelope in front of him. These are divorce papers. My father wanted to crush you in court, drag it out for years. But I just want it done. Sign them. Release your rights to any assets that might remain. Not that there are any. And release your parental rights to his memory. I don't want you fighting me for where he's buried." Julian picked up the envelope with trembling hands. "I'll sign," he said. "I'll sign right now." "Good." Elena turned to walk away. "Elena?" She stopped. Does Volkov stop now?" Elena looked back over her shoulder. Her eyes were sad. "My father is a force of nature, Julian. He stopped because I asked him to. I told him that seeing you like this, broken, working for minimum wage alone, was better justice than prison." She paused. "He wanted to destroy you. I convinced him to let you live with yourself. I think my punishment is worse." She got into the car. Lydia Cross drove her away. Julian sat on the grass, the envelope in his hand. He was free. The war was over. Volkov had called off the dogs. But Elena was right. The silence was worse. The realization that he had dismissed his son's death as a scraped knee was a sound that would play in his head forever. He took a pen from his work pocket and signed the papers against the damp wood of the bench. He stood up. He had a choice now. He could go back to the bottle, drown the memory, and fade away like Pete the stockbroker. Or he could try to build something new. Not an empire, not a fortune, but a life that wasn't a lie. He walked back toward the city. He had a shift in the morning. He couldn't be late. But the story wasn't quite over, because Viktor Volkov never left loose ends. And there was one final twist waiting for Julian, a revelation about that night that would change everything he thought he knew about his own fall. It had been exactly 1 year since Leo died. Julian Thorne sat on the edge of his twin bed in a small one-bedroom apartment in Tacoma. The room was sparse, a second-hand dresser, a lamp, and the red plastic race car sitting on a shelf dusted daily. He wasn't a CEO anymore. He wasn't rich. He was a foreman for the construction crew now, respected by his men for his work ethic, not his bank account. He paid his bills on time. He read books from the library. He lived a quiet life of penance. The rain was falling again, just like that night. Julian looked at the calendar. He had planned to drive to the cemetery this evening to place fresh white lilies on the grave. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Julian frowned. He didn't have visitors. He opened the door to find a courier standing there. Not a regular mailman, but a man in a sharp black suit holding a small, sealed box. "Package for Mr. Thorne," the man said. "From who?" "From the estate of Viktor Volkov." Julian's heart skipped a beat. He signed for it, his hands shaking. He took the box inside and sat at his small kitchen table. He used a knife to slit the tape. Inside, nestled in black foam, was his old smartphone. The one he had that night, the one he thought was lost forever. Underneath the phone was a single note on heavy cream stationery. "You have served your sentence, Julian. You have learned the value of silence and the cost of negligence. But a man cannot rebuild his foundation if he believes the ground is cursed. There is one thing you do not know, one thing I kept from you, so you would feel the full weight of your choices. Now you have earned the truth." Look at the sent messages, 11:35 p.m. Julian stared at the phone. It was fully charged. He turned it on. The screen lit up with the old wallpaper, a stock photo of a beach. He hadn't even had a picture of Leo as his background. The shame pricked him, but he pushed past it. He opened the messaging app. He scrolled down to the thread with the wife. He remembered the missed calls. He remembered Sasha turning the phone off at 11:42 p.m. But Volkov's note said 11:35 p.m. Julian looked at the timestamp. There was a text message sent to Elena. Julian froze. He hadn't texted her. He had been in the shower at 11:35 p.m., washing off the day before getting into bed with Sasha. He read the message. To Elena, stop blowing up my phone. You are pathetic and clingy. If the kid is sick, deal with it. I'm busy living my life. Do not call again. Julian stopped breathing. The room spun. He didn't write that. He would never write that. He was a cheater, yes. He was negligent, yes. But he loved Leo. He would never have dismissed a medical emergency with such cruelty. He realized what had happened with a sickening clarity. While he was in the shower, the phone had buzzed. Sasha had seen it. Sasha, jealous and possessive, wanting to sever his tie to his wife, had picked up the phone. She had read Elena's frantic texts about the reaction. And instead of alerting Julian, she had sent that message. She had blocked the help. She had sealed Leo's fate. And she had deleted the message from the sent folder view, but not from the cloud archive, which Volkov's hackers had obviously retrieved. "Oh, God," Julian whispered, dropping the phone. "That's why. That was why Elena called her father. That was why she said the monster died that night. She didn't just think he was ignoring her. She thought he had actively told her to let their son die." Rage, hot and blinding, surged through Julian. He wanted to drive to the prison and scream at Sasha until his throat bled. He wanted to tear the world apart. But then the rage subsided, leaving a strange, hollow relief. He wasn't the monster. He was a fool. He was a bad husband. But he wasn't a child killer. He grabbed his coat and the red race car. He drove to the cemetery, his old Ford truck rattling on the wet highway. He ran through the gates, ignoring the rain, until he found the grave. The marble angel stood tall, watching over the small plot. Julian fell to his knees in the mud. He placed the car next to the headstone. "I didn't say it, Leo," he sobbed, pressing his forehead against the cold marble. "I promise, I didn't say it. I didn't know." He cried for an hour, letting go of the darkness that had convinced him he was evil incarnate. He was just a man who had made a terrible mistake by trusting the wrong person. When he finally stood up, he saw a figure standing under a black umbrella a few yards away. It was Viktor Volkov. The old man didn't look as terrifying as before. He looked tired. "You knew," Julian said, his voice hoarse. "You knew Sasha sent that text. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me believe I was a monster for a year?" "Because you needed to break," Viktor said softly. "If you knew Sasha did it, you would have blamed her for everything. You would have played the victim. You would have said, 'It wasn't my fault.' But Julian, you were in that hotel room. You created the situation where she could do that. You had to own the sin before you could be absolved of the crime." Viktor stepped closer. "Elena knows," Viktor said. "I showed her the forensic log yesterday. She knows you didn't send the text." "Does she forgive me?" Julian asked, hope flaring in his chest. Viktor shook his head slowly. "No. Forgiveness is for things that can be fixed. This cannot be fixed. But she no longer hates you. She feels pity. And perhaps peace." Viktor reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "She asked me to give you this." Julian took it. "Go, Julian," Viktor said, turning his back. "Live a good life. A quiet life. Do not let my grandson's memory be in vain." Viktor walked away, his bodyguards trailing him, fading into the gray mist like ghosts. Julian opened the envelope. Inside was a photo. It was a picture of Leo, laughing, sitting on Julian's shoulders at a park, a memory from 3 years ago, before the money and the mistress ruined everything. On the back, in Elena's handwriting, were 3 words: "He loved you." Julian held the photo to his chest. He took a deep breath of the cold, clean air. The crushing weight was gone. The scar remained, but the wound was closed. He walked back to his truck. He had work in the morning. He had a life to build, not for the cameras, not for the bank account, but for the little boy who loved him. Julian Thorne started the engine and drove out of the cemetery. The rain stopped, and for the first time in a year, the clouds parted just enough to let a single ray of sunlight hit the road ahead. And that is the story of Julian Thorne, a man who had everything, lost it all, and had to walk through hell to find his own soul. It's a tragic reminder that while money can buy silence, it can never buy back time. And sometimes, the people we trust with our hearts are the ones holding the knife. What do you think? Did Viktor Volkov go too far with his revenge? Or was it the only way to make Julian truly understand his actions? And what about Sasha? Did she deserve an even worse fate? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and remember, treasure the ones you love, because a missed call can sometimes mean a missed lifetime.